Charles, a 79-year-old man, could no longer live in his country house because his niece decided to have him committed to a nursing home. When he tried to fulfill his last wish and leave his home to a poor single mother, his greedy niece stopped him. But when the young mother entered the house, she found something inside that changed her life completely. Since his wife's death, Charlie had lived alone in his small but cozy country house. He had been able to care for himself all his life, not needing anyone to do anything. Still, as his age advanced, the difficulty of living alone also increased. At the height of his 79 years, he still tried to keep the house and yard clean, even though his energy and health could no longer keep up with his will. Charlie was replacing wood in the fireplace when his phone rang through the house. On the other end of the line was his niece, who addressed the same old subject again. "Uncle, we shouldn't be discussing this any longer. You must go to a nursing home urgently. You will have health professionals and everything prepared to take care of you in the best possible way," said the young woman. Charlie went silent, and Sophia kept arguing that the older man would have activities in that place and other people to spend time with, so he would no longer be alone. Charlie listened to all the arguments and finally decided that it was okay, he could live in a nursing home. After all, he knew his niece Sophia would insist until he accepted. Since the death of his only son, Charlie had no one else in his life, except for Sophia, who, although she never visited him, was always in touch to try to send him to live elsewhere. The older man agreed, but first, he wanted to know what the young woman intended to do with his country house and the small piece of land around it, which contained a beautiful garden that his late wife had raised and he lovingly maintained for the following years. Sophia listened carefully and decided it would be best to sell the place and that Charlie could keep all the money. "And well, of course, I won't mind if you leave me a small commission," the young woman said in a playful but, at the same time, mischievous voice. However, it seemed Charlie had everything ready since he had agreed to go to the nursing home. And his wish was only one and very simple: he wanted to donate his house to a neighbor named Emily. She was a single mother with 2 intelligent children, but due to the tragic consequences of life, she lived in a house falling apart that could be condemned by the city at any moment. And even with cheap rent, she was about to be evicted for late payments. Emily had shown herself to be a pure and good-hearted woman since the day she met Charlie, so helping her would be a moral obligation that the man believed he had. A good woman could not live in such unhealthy conditions, especially when accompanied by 2 small children and having no one to count on. However, Sophia did not seem to like the idea and almost instantly showed her dissatisfaction with her uncle. She said she did not trust Emily, as the woman might be a gold digger. But to reassure her uncle and get him to accept the idea of living in the nursing home, Sophia said she would see what she could do to fulfill the older man's request. But the single mother and the elderly man's niece did not know that Charlie would leave something in the cottage far more valuable than the residence itself. Emily was young, only 27, but the abandonment by her husband and the death of her mother, her only family, led her into a deep depression that hindered her professional life and even the well-being of her 2 children. Emily and Charlie had known each other for almost 2 years, and it all started when the older man was returning from the supermarket and his shopping bag was too heavy. Emily's oldest son ran to help the older man and got the loads for him. Then Emily and the children helped Charlie carry everything to his home. The young mother had no idea that this small act of kindness was the beginning of a massive change in her life. Since then, Emily has constantly been helping Charlie with small things and even cooking for him, since the older man has never been very skilled in the kitchen and has eaten poorly on an improvised basis since the death of his wife. Despite much insistence from the man, Emily never accepted any money as payment. On the contrary, her interactions with Charlie reminded the young woman of her late father, and she took great pleasure in helping him. Moreover, she noticed Charlie lived utterly alone and without luxuries, and she was already satisfied with the small meals that the older man prepared for the young mother, with what was left of his food, to take to her and her children to eat. The years went by, and the 2 loners improbably became friends. Once in a while, the older man invited the woman and her children to his house for lunch. They respected each other, and Emily listened attentively to all his advice, taking it as if the older man had become a kind of mentor to her. Charlie even noticed that his symptoms of depression, which the death of his wife had caused, had lessened. When Charlie told Emily he was moving to a nursing home, he could not hold back his tears. He explained that it had been 3 years since his niece called him weekly to move out of the country house, and he did not have any more energy to confront and discuss it. As far as Charlie was concerned, he would be happy living in his house until his last breath. After all, the older man and his wife had built that house with their own hands. "But in this life, we can't have everything we want, can we?" said the man, resigned to his tragic fate. Emily hugged him and replied that he could always count on her if he needed help. He thanked her for everything she had done. "Thanks for making me feel useful again, Emily." In less than a month, Charlie was sent to the nursing home. His niece Sophia took the lead, chose the place, and arranged the paperwork quickly, not caring about the older man's preferences and opinions, since she did not even consult him about it. Emily did not have the chance to see Charlie move. That the older man had gone, since she never saw him again around the market she always used to go to, or in the surroundings of his country house. Her children missed playing with the older man, since they had been very close to him during the last few years. So Emily went to the older man's country house from time to time to, who knows, meet him there and at least have a proper farewell. However, in one of her visits, it was not Charlie whom the young mother found. Inside the house was Sophia, his niece. She seemed to be packing dusty items into old, worn-out boxes. Emily approached her to offer help or even introduce herself, figuring Charlie had told his niece about her. However, as she introduced herself and asked about Charlie's whereabouts, Emily was scared by the words the young niece threw at her.
"Get out of here, filthy! I know very well who you are, and I don't even want you to come near my yard. Unlike my uncle, I will not give you money to support your children or addictions."
Emily did not expect such rudeness from the niece of a man as polite as Charlie, and was silent for a second, not knowing what to say or how to act. When trying to reason with her niece, Emily was ignored and then practically kicked off the property, while Sophia threatened to call the police if she did not leave immediately. Thus, knowing that there are only 3 nursing homes in the city, 2 being closer to her neighborhood, and the last in a remote region, Emily left her children at the community daycare and went early the following day to try to find Charlie. After visiting the first 2 nursing homes, her hopes were negative, and her mood had never been so low since Charlie could be anywhere in the city and the country. After all, what guaranteed that Sophia had not put her uncle in the farthest place possible? Emily was suspicious of her niece's character, so she was prepared for anything. After missing a bus and walking for hours to get to the farthest nursing home in town, Emily arrived at the front desk, almost fainting from exhaustion. She then asked if resident Charlie could receive a visit. She said it so as not to seem uninformed and be kicked out of the place, just as happened before at the older man's country house. To her surprise, the attendant said the man was in and could receive visits, but only from his family. Then, Emily responded, "It's okay, I'm his niece," the young mother said without a flinch, aiming to see her friend finally. The nurse just looked at her and said, "Oh yes, I was finding it strange to have only heard your voice all these weeks. You finally came to visit your uncle, I guess he can use some company." That made it clear to Emily that Sophia never looked for her uncle again after his admission. Knowing that visiting hours were about to end, Emily hurried down the hallways to enjoy the time with Charlie she would still have left. Besides, she would have to pick up her children from daycare in a few hours. Everything was going well, and she was excited to see her friend, but she was incredulous at what her eyes witnessed. Her old friend, lying in bed with a sad expression, looked as ill and frail as ever. Upon seeing Emily, the older man even managed to nod his head and smile with his eyes, asking the nurse to sit him down so that he could talk to the woman. Emily sat in the chair by Charlie's bed, and he began to ask how she was doing and about her children. Emily hated to give bad news, even more to a man in that state, but she told him the truth that even she would not like to believe. She also said that her youngest son had been sick for a few weeks, but the doctors had not yet identified what was wrong with him, which worried her even more. Charlie seemed to gather strength while listening to the woman, as if he were making a crucial life decision in silence. When he finally managed to whisper in Emily's ear what he wanted to say so badly, the woman changed utterly, her worried expression giving way to a surprised face. "No way such a thing is possible. You've got to be kidding me, Charlie," the young mother said, totally disbelieving what she had heard. Charlie giggled a few times, seeming to be finally happy to have it off, then shook her hand and said, "I would have left it to my son, but he left before I could give him this gift, so now it's yours. Use it to care for your family and your son to be healthy." The nurse then entered the room and told her that visiting hours were over. Emily got up, looked at the bed where the old man was, and smiled, nodding, "Don't think you'll get rid of me that easily, Charlie. I'll be back tomorrow, only earlier, and we'll talk better about everything." The plan seemed to be perfect, and longing began as soon as she stepped out the door, but what she did not expect was that these would be her last words to her dear friend. The next day, Emily did the same as the day before. She took her children to the daycare and headed directly to the nursing home. She had hidden a pasta pot, Charlie's favorite dish, in her purse this time. Upon arriving at the nursing home, Emily was shocked to receive the news that Charlie had passed away in the early morning. Looking in surprise at the same nurse as the day before, she was asked if the older man's other niece had not told her, since they had called her in the early morning hours. Without answering, Emily just hurried away with a sad look. For years she and Charlie had been best friends, and now he was gone for good. The woman returned to her house totally in pieces and found yet another eviction notice pinned to the door. After being alone to absorb the news, she headed toward the country house. As she walked to the site, she overcame mixed feelings. According to Charlie's last wish, the country house would be hers, but unfortunately, she would no longer have the older man to share her joy. Grabbing a copy of the key from under the mat, as they had always left it, Emily went inside and sat down on the couch. She tried to relax, but she could not stop thinking about Charlie and how he had passed away alone, with no one by his side. No matter how it looked, the place now seemed like an empty house, with several memories of the late friend playing with her children over the years. To the children, Charlie was like a grandfather they never had. For a second, she remembered what Charlie had whispered to her in their last conversation and went into the older man's room and pushed his bed aside, finding a small trapdoor on the floor. Then, thinking it was just another prank by the older man, she crouched down and slowly opened it. But Emily could not believe her eyes. Inside the box were 3 gold bars that were so shiny that they seemed fake for a second. Emily had never seen that in her life, except in bank robbery movies. That was Charlie's life savings, which explained why he lived so simply. Charlie's goal was to leave it to his son, but with his son's death, the older man considered that gold useless, except for the excellent use that Emily would now give it to. Emily was shaking with nervousness. She did not know whether to save those gold bars again or to run home with them. So she thought for a few moments, took out the gold bars and decided to put them in a more substantial box, went to the door, and, as if everything was evident in her mind, put her plan into practice. First, the next day, Emily decided to clean the house entirely and hung a picture of Charlie near the door, placing a candle in honor of her dear friend. There was enough room for their children to settle in, but what seemed perfect would end in just 2 days. This is because Sophia, Charlie's niece, arrived at the cottage and was terrified to see Emily and her children living there. Outraged, she asked what she thought she was doing there, and Emily did not hide the truth or beat around the bush, and told her about her visit to Charlie on his last day of life and the promise he made that the house, and everything inside, was now hers and her children's. Sophia laughed scornfully, accusing Emily of being a gold digger and someone who must have mental problems to think such a thing. "Do you really think my uncle would leave his house to a complete stranger and 2 brats?" Sophia immediately called the police, and 20 minutes later, a policeman knocked on the country house door and heard both sides of the story. "Madam, for this to be valid, I need to see the will that proves that the house is indeed yours. If not, I ask you to please leave the premises immediately," said the officer respectfully to Emily. The young mother remained silent in front of the policeman. Her children witnessed the whole thing. Emily was forced to remove her children's items and put them out of the house, so she did it with care. Sophia stated that this was not the end. She would still report the young mother for trespassing and do everything to put her behind bars. If Charlie's niece had known what would happen weeks later, she would have been less arrogant. With Sophia's accusation, Emily was obliged to appear at the police station to answer the charges of the home invasion. However, because she had no criminal record and had 2 children who depended exclusively on her, Emily was released, but forced to seek the public defender's office to defend her case. With the restraining order she received, Emily could not go near the country house, so she did not even see the for sale sign stuck in the house's backyard. Furthermore, Sophia did not bother to remove Charlie's items from the place, leaving everything included in the home sale. A few weeks later, the first offers arrived. Among them was Andrew, a lawyer from a renowned law firm. He called Sophia and declared his interest in buying the property. The place was simple and not highly valued, so the man said he would pay in cash. Since the other offers had installment plans, Sophia immediately accepted and arranged for the man to receive the property keys in 2 weeks. The young woman explained that she could not hand over the cottage before removing all the old junk left there. However, Andrew informed her that there would be no problem, he was in a hurry and would accept the place just as it was. Sophia could not have been happier on the phone and arranged to meet him to hand over the keys and receive her money the following day. At 9 a.m. on a Wednesday, the lawyer arrived in a luxury car with dark-tinted glass. He got out, introduced himself as the person responsible for contacting the niece, and said he was happy to close the negotiations. Andrew then opened a suitcase containing the cash and let Sophia count every bill in it. After checking pack by pack, Sophia signed the documents presented by Andrew and congratulated the man for buying the house. But the man, with a piercing gaze and a calm expression, looked at Sophia and said, "I thank you for everything, but I think it would be better if you congratulate the real new owner of the house. I'm just a lawyer, and I only came here to guarantee the sale to be properly legalized." Then, the passenger door of the luxury car opened, and a woman wearing expensive and impeccable clothes stepped out of it. Sophia looked closely, seeming to recognize her from somewhere, but she was confused and unsure about it. But Sophia had no more doubts when the woman finally sat at the negotiating table. To her most terrible shock, that woman was Emily. "This is Emily, my client and newest owner of this bucolic country house. Now, if you don't mind, would you please hand over the keys to her?" Sophia could not move, she was so shocked. She felt humiliated at the same time as coerced and completely confused. With much hesitation and anger, Sophia handed over the house's keys, not believing what was happening before her eyes. Then, Emily finally said what she wanted long ago: "You never cared about your uncle's real wishes, only about what he could yield for you. And because of you, he passed away alone in that nursing home. Living with this guilt will not be easy. I am sorry that you didn't bother to learn what an amazing person he was. But at the same time, I am relieved that he didn't have to live by your side. By the way, I am also glad you met my lawyer. We will soon file a lawsuit against you for elderly coercion and mistreatment. So be prepared to see this money you just received vanish. See you in court." And this is how Emily said goodbye to Sophia that day, closing the door of her house while looking into her angry eyes. Emily promised to be respectful of the country house that Charles and his wife had dedicated so much time to build, and told the lawyer that she would raise her children with pride in that place. The young mother relit the candle below Charlie's photo, and that night she had a peaceful sleep, one of which she had not for years, knowing that her deceased old friend's wishes had finally come true. If you like this story, I kindly ask you to leave a thumbs up, and this other video appearing on the screen will probably move you as well. So have a good session, and I see you in the next video.